Hello everyone, and welcome to today's webinar called Location Intelligence, a Critical Tool in Retail Performance Management. I'm Debbie House, Editor-in-Chief of Retail Touchpoints, and I'll be moderating today's presentation. We're honored today to be joined by Gary Sankary from Esri and Joe Whitley from Environics Analytics, who will share insights into how location intelligence can improve business performance. This webinar event is the second in a series of 7 presented as part of the Retail Touchpoints 2018 Retail Strategy and Planning Series. During the series, attendees have the opportunity to hear from leading industry experts who are discussing the most important topics on retailers' minds today. And by registering for one session, attendees have access to all complimentary presentations, both live and on demand. The series is presented by Retail Touchpoints. On this slide, you can find out how to reach us at our retailtouchpoints.com website, on Twitter and LinkedIn. And for those of you who might be new to Retail Touchpoints, here's a quick overview. We're an all-digital media company publishing e-newsletters 3 times a week that go out to our more than 50,000 retail executive subscribers. We cover the industry via daily news, features and special reports, exclusive industry surveys, and multimedia presentations. If you haven't done so already, please subscribe to our newsletter at retailtouchpoints.com. We want to let you know that we've just announced registration is open for our 2019 Retail Innovation Conference being held in New York City, May 6th through 8th. You can find out more at retailinnovationconference.com. We hope to see you there. And by participating in this series, the Retail Strategy and Planning Series, you will have the opportunity to win a few things, a $10 Starbucks gift card each day and also free passes to the 2019 Retail Innovation Conference. So good luck with that. In today's presentation, we're using the On24 platform. Right now, you should be viewing the On24 dashboard, which shows the live viewing screen. By clicking on the Questions widget on the right-hand side of the screen, you can type in questions during the live presentation and press Submit. You'll also find a widget named Resources under Questions, and there you can download any assets that our presenters have provided. All you have to do is click on the resource, and it'll automatically download for you. And we also invite you to share comments on Twitter during the session using the RSP18 hashtag. On the left-hand side of the screen, you'll see the live feed. If you're not able to attend one or more of the sessions, they're going to be free to all registrants. You can access them on demand at your convenience. To learn more, go to the Retail Touchpoints website. Before I introduce today's speakers, I want to remind the audience that the presentation is slated for approximately 30 minutes with time for live questions at the end. And I'll remind you, we invite you to submit questions in the On24 questions area as they come to mind. Our presenters have agreed to stay online following the presentation to respond to your questions. I also want to point out a few other housekeeping items. The webinar is being recorded, and all attendees will receive an archive link to the presentation to go back and review or share with colleagues. So our first presenter today is Gary Sankary, who leads Industry Marketing Strategy for Esri. Gary joined Esri in 2014 as a subject matter expert in retail after spending 30 years in the industry. His retail career started in his parents' family business more than 40 years ago. Along the way, he had an opportunity to work with Cost Plus Imports, Mervyn's, and Target Corporation, where he led a number of cross-functional teams developing technology and business process strategies to support store and digital marketing initiatives. At Esri, he's served as a subject matter expert in the retail sector, working where he works with retailers facing some of the same challenges faced during his 25 years at Target, leading cross-functional teams. His extensive background in merchandising, product development, planning, and supply chain management have provided unique retail insights for the customers at Esri and its partners, helping them to extend their business capabilities with mapping and spatial analysis. He continues to identify and develop retail-focused technology partners, helping them connect with retailers to extend critical business capabilities through the implementation of location strategies and mapping technology. And we'll also hear from Joe Whitley from Environics Analytics, a forward-thinking business development executive offering more than 30 years of demonstrated success in providing strategic leadership and vision to global Fortune 1000 companies in the retail, restaurant, real estate, and financial industries. Joe provides strong subject matter expertise in real estate research, corporate marketing, strategic marketing, and customer analytics. He's a respected visionary leader with exceptional business acumen and a deep understanding of the best practices for helping companies apply proven leading-edge techniques to improve enterprise-wide innovation and marketing success rates. In his current role as Senior Analytic Consultant, Joe works with cross-functional teams in sales, location research, marketing, and analytics to provide custom-tailored client solutions for marketing and real estate development. Prior to joining the company in 2016, Joe was with Nielsen Corporation, where he held positions in sales, product innovation, business development, and location research consulting. So with that, I'm going to get ready to turn the presentation over to Gary. Welcome, Gary.
Thank you, Debbie. So I know, on behalf of Joe and myself, we're really excited to be here. And part of this planning series, I think, when I think back on my retail career, I can't tell you what percentage of it was spent either planning out the next month, the next 6 months, the next year, trying to plan what kind of assortments, what sorts of stores we wanted to build. I mean, it's really integral. And so I'm excited now to, in my new role, or not new, quite so new, but anyways, here at Esri to talk about location intelligence and the role that location data plays in retail planning. And I know Joe's has got some really interesting things to say around how we can bring in all of this location data to facilitate modeling and forecasting, which at the essence is why we go through this planning exercise as rigorously as we do in the retail world. So to begin with, I want to start with a study that we did with our friends at RSR Research. So this is one of the country's leading retail technology research firms, and they looked at around the use of location data and in which particular capabilities did they feel that, or did retailers feel that location information, location data was going to be really important. And no surprise, at the very top of the list, we have site selection market analysis, which is where do I put locations, and this can be stores, it can be fulfillment centers, it can be any kind of physical location that a retailer might need. What about the products? What products do I want to put in a specific location? And also understanding customer traffic and how customers interact and move. And we're going to talk quite a bit more about that as we move forward. So clearly, if you look at those, almost 90% across the board of retailers today feel that these capabilities are really important to their organization and require this kind of location-specific data. And speaking of data, data is everywhere, and we've talked about this. We talk about this a lot. And when I'm out talking with CIOs out there in the marketplace, I have yet to have anyone tell me that in retail, I just don't have enough data. What I typically hear over and over again is that we've got a ton of data. It's coming at us from everywhere. It's coming at us from everything. And I'm not confident that we're able to find the right data to get the insights that we need to be able to make the right business decisions. So to think about that a little bit, so because of the kind of sheer volume of that data, I think it's important to break it down and categorize it a bit so we can understand what is really important and how can we bring that into our modeling and forecasting to understand where our success is coming from. And we have 4 quadrants that we've sort of characterized them. The first being the trade area, and building an accurate trade area so that you can aggregate location-centric data within that trade area is really vitally important. And what a trade area, what we talk about here, is really what is happening in and around a specific physical location. Where's the competition? Where are my stores? How am I cannibalizing? How are my sales impacted? And trying to understand who and what are inside that particular geography. The next quadrant I want to talk is consumer behaviors, and this is all about the people and the people who are in and around those locations and how do they interact with the location. And the data at our disposal to be able to look at this is things like demographic data, so we understand who they are from a demographic, sociographic standpoint, understanding where they spend and what they spend on, data that's available to us from a number of sources, from census data, different kinds of modeling data. And then finally, and this is sort of an up-and-coming data source that retailers are getting really excited about, but really human movement data. And where do they start their day, and where do they go during the day, and where do they end their day? And that helps us understand a lot about where they live, work, and play. Everybody in retail thinks intuitively about their store characteristics, but being able to categorize that data specifically. Every retailer that I know of has a different strategy for their stores, whether they have urban stores or rural stores, Are the stores in a strip mall? Are they standalone? What kind of neighborhood are they in? I know a lot of retailers have different branding in order to reach different segments of the population. And I can tell you from my experience at the big box world, we're all looking for smaller locations, and how do we get down into specific neighborhoods. All of those come into play when we're trying to understand what makes a store successful. And finally, the operational data. Our stores are generating their own data just each and every day. And this is all data that we also need to take into account. Things like point of sale. So what is actually moving through our check lanes? I mean, that's something we've been looking at for a long time. But now we have to also expand that to what's moving through our mobile apps and what's moving through the websites, and how can we tie these things together. What sort of transportation networks support the store, and how are they able to receive and process goods? And then finally, things that the store team are doing to generate data. And how are they helping customers? How are they servicing the store? All of that is important. Our agenda today, what we want to talk about is a couple of things. First of all, we want to talk a little bit about some of these new data sources that are available today in the retail environment, and then talk about strategies that we can use to analyze the insights from all of this kind of disparate data. When we talk about modeling and site model development, and then finally location science and how spatially enabled analytics enable you to consume disparate data, and using geography be able to tie it to a location on the ground and bring in several layers and create a really multifaceted view and get insights that really aren't available any other way. So in order to be able to do this, we're going to use an example of an unnamed casual dining restaurant. Okay. So this is a customer, and they have some challenges, like every customer-facing business does today, that they're trying to get on top of. So the first thing that they're concerned about is there's a change in demographics going on in the marketplace today, especially in the restaurant business. So we see some some generational differences in how people approach eating out between millennials and boomers. They just have different expectations. They have different expectations on service and different expectations on price and frequency. And this is something in the restaurant business we need to understand. We need to understand how it impacts our stores. The competition there's issues with competition. There's really a blurring going on today of dining segments between, what used to be fine dining versus casual dining is kind of turned around, and some places are offering all of the above. We've got new food concepts and new trends coming out. I can tell you from my experience, food is a pretty trendy sort of category. So if a hot new cuisine comes along, are we able to react? Is this meaningful for us? And then finally, customer-facing businesses are all suspect to the changes coming from unified commerce and omni-channel. And in the food area, that looks like the home delivery services. So I've got services online now where I can buy 5 nights worth of cooking, and all of the meals come prepackaged. And when that happens, that's 5 nights that I'm not eating out. And so how do we react to that in the restaurant business? And then finally, the various channels, like dining in, obviously. Home delivery is a new one, but takeout, I think restaurants were probably some of the earlier adopters of buy online, pick up in store. We just called it takeout at the time. And the catering business that they want to pursue. So in order to react, we're trying to build some strategies, and we have 4 key points that they're working on. Number 1 is really to understand at a very local level what are the key metrics that are driving success. They want to be able to engage their customers with more relevant offers and experiences to keep them within their stores. Or in their restaurants. They want people to feel at home and to feel like this is my go-to spot when it's time for me to make a meal decision. They want to grow sales in their existing restaurants, so growing incremental sales, and that's going to require, again, understanding who your customers are and what sorts of offers can attract more business and more frequent visits. And then finally, finding new opportunities out there in the marketplace to continue their growth. And the way they're going to do that is by pulling in, as we've been talking about, some of these data points into a modeling process. For that, I'm going to turn it back over to my friend Joe, and he'll go through some of the data that comes into the modeling and what the results and how they're going to be able to use that.
Okay, thank you, Gary. For those of you who are familiar with site models and the application of the models, I think you'll agree that site model development is both an art and a science. And it does involve a careful blending of statistics and measurement and logic to develop an actionable and reliable tool that can be applied to a prospective location to estimate potential. Therefore, it's important to take into account critical information that impact performance. This includes customer insights or urbanicity, trade area extent, as well as statistically defined variables on demographics and activity and competition and site and situational characteristics, all of the things that Gary had talked about in the early part of the webinar. But collectively, these variables help explain variations in historical sales as input into the final model. So we normally describe each of these components shown as building blocks, historical, and since the learnings and insights gained from each preceding step feed into the final development of a site model. Since the key objective of a site potential model is to predict consumer behavior, the first step of the process begins with developing a firm understanding of the customer, which today cannot be overemphasized. Given the complexity of the marketplace with a changing demographic and multiple channel options and a more rigorous competitive landscape, advanced analytics combined with demographics and segmentation and available data sources on usage behaviors for brick and mortar and other channels, co-tenancy preferences, etc., each play a vital role for the development of a site potential model. Urbanicity also plays an important role in terms of how far consumers are willing to travel to a store location based on where they work and live and play, the competitive and demographic landscape of a store trading area, and the effects on channel usage behavior and preferences. With that in mind, it is important to ensure that there is consistency in the store sample by classifying stores based on similar urbanicity classifications that we call urbanicity typing. We have defined 15 homogeneous groups that we use to classify every block group in terms of employment and population density that can be applied to existing and prospective locations. Typically, depending on sample size and for reasons mentioned, each urbanicity group will normally require a separate model. Measuring the trade area extent in terms of how far customers are willing to travel to a site has increased in complexity over the years. This is because the trade area is more greatly influenced by where people shop, work, and live relative to a site. Trade areas are also influenced by urbanicity and competitive alternatives and local activity. And we will be talking more on this topic, which includes how advances in technology and data are used to define a representative trading area for existing and prospective sites. Metrics is a process of using available data sources, the components of the preceding analysis, and advanced analytics to identify key variables and their interactions that explain store sales across the sample that is used for model development. For this analysis, it's important to take a multi-dimensional view of those factors that can be influenced, or that can influence store sales, including demographics and demand, competition, activity, consumer behavior as inputs into the analysis. It's also very important to not only consider the trade area extent, but also the effects of distance on those variables selected in the key metrics analysis. Site model development is the culmination of insights learned from each of the preceding steps, where the site model weights each of the variables identified in key metrics based on their relative significance. The final model, and this is important, and it is properly validated, then serves as a useful tool for site and market planning. There's a tendency in the marketplace to refer to the term site model as a predictor of sales, which is simply not the case. Instead, site models should be referred to as a decision support tool that fits the specific business needs and objectives of the client, which calls for a more scalable approach. For example, site screening models, analog models, and site scoring models are very good tools that require less data and analytics but serve as an important input for identifying and screening prospective locations that meet certain minimum thresholds. These are descriptive tools, and they're not normally associated with a predictive outcome such as sales or profits. As we move up the food chain, we now apply more advanced analytics and additional data sources, since the models are now required to predict an outcome for a prospective location. Now, we'll be talking more about our most advanced spatial interaction model later in the webinar. With any model, there are challenges, and we all know that if we've used or developed models on our own. But it's also extremely important to ensure that the proper procedures are established for data collection, best business practices used to build a model, and proper technique for model validation to ensure the model works properly in the marketplace. Our many years of experience in building models have identified several reasons why models do not work as expected for site and market planning. One of the contributors is statistical overfitting the model, and we're adding additional variables to the model until all the residuals are explained in the model. With a growing trend of using artificial intelligence and machine learning techniques in the marketplace, or just inexperience, these instant models do have a tendency to overfit and are only met with disappointment in actual application. Other reasons for a model not meeting desired expectations also has to do with limitations in available data on the customer or sales, site and situational characteristics, including externally available data sources. Since the model only sees the variables that are actually used, it's very important to use proper discretion and when setting the expectations on the intended use and application of the model. So in some instances, for example, we have ruled out against developing a predictive sales model because of limited information and suggested the development of a descriptive model with a favorable outcome to the client. Also, with any model that is developed, there should be guidelines for validating the model for its effectiveness and authenticity.
Okay, so thanks, Joe. I want to talk a little bit about the trade areas now and a couple of the different methodologies that we're employing to build trade areas. Back in the day when I first was in this business, we were doing a very simple trade area development using drop the pin and go out X number of miles. And while that can certainly capture some of the data and some of the population around a store, it really isn't good enough today. It doesn't really give us the flexibility to understand who folks are. And the reason that evolution was to start to use drive times or some other metric to maybe incorporate an even more accurate model. Today, however, with disposal, we have a lot of ways to be far more accurate and far more precise in our trade area development. And in this example, what I've got on the screen right now shows for a number of stores in the Twin Cities, we decided to use the CRM and leverage CRM data to build a model. And we've got two different color shapes around each store. The lighter color shape, we wanted to capture 85% of our customers within who shop at that store from our CRM and see where they're coming from. And this helps us from a marketing standpoint. It also helps us when we use data enrichment to understand, the neighborhoods that folks are coming from. The darker colored shape identifies where 85% of the volume is coming from. And what that tells us, if you look on the east side of this map, you see a much larger delta between the light and the dark. is in that store we probably have customers who are spending more at that store but are traveling further than we would expect. So something we may want to take into account in our data when we start to pull this stuff into our models. And today we've even gotten to the point a little bit about mobile data, but being able to identify where people are coming from and where they go and where they spend their time during the day. And this becomes really important in retail because to add a temporal or a time factor to this, to be able to now understand where they are in the morning versus midday versus evening, and this can impact, again, what kind of offers do I want to have, what sort of communication do I want, who are the customers likely to be at a given time. So now I'm going to turn it back over to Joe, and he's going to show how spatial interaction models work and how what they are, how we can interact with those things, and all the different dimensions that we can come in that you can pull in to affect your business. So with that, I'm going to turn it over again to my friend Joe.
Okay, thank you. As the name implies, spatial interaction models combine data and advanced analytics to predict sales for a retail, a bank, a restaurant location, telecom location, etc. And the modeling process is really comprised of the interaction of 4 key measurable elements. And this is one of the more complex models that can be built. And they appeal to the decision maker because they are predictive, they're very interactive, and offer the ability to utilize these models for scenario building. So at the risk of oversimplifying the process, I'd like to describe the 4 elements for the development of a spatial interaction model. The first element is total dollars available to spend for each component area of geography, which can come from customer transaction data or syndicated research sources on consumer spend for products and services, which are abundantly available. However, not everyone has the same preference for a retail or restaurant location, for example. So that's where we're into the element of attractiveness. And attractiveness is the combination of quantifiable factors that make a location desirable to the consumer. This includes the size of the units, the merchandise offering, signage, visibility, accessibility, brand perception, things of that nature. This measures the likelihood consumers are willing to travel from home and work or shop to a given location, and can be modeled in many different ways. And this is where the element of the mobile data certainly comes into play in this type of process, and we use it quite extensively. Another used is a measure of affinity, which measures customer preference for a brand over other options that are available to the consumer. The need for a detailed and comprehensive customer analysis that we described earlier is an important component when we measure affinity. Collectively, these 4 measurable elements become the foundation for the development and application of a spatial interaction model, which leads us to the next slide, where we illustrate the relationship between these elements as an input for estimating sales for a prospective site. This is an illustration of the relationship between the 4 elements described, including the modeled variables and how they would appear on a site detail report, which is one of the tools that we would use to support a business decision. Here you see a thematic map with estimated demand for casual dining, in this case. Included is the prospective location, competition, major shopping centers, etc. We also show thematically the demand for casual dining and full-service restaurant behavior. The adjoining site detail report shows the variables that contribute to the sales estimate for this location based on their respective weights. Also note the urbanicity, type assignment, and the sales by channel, which can be actually accomplished through the development of additional models in addition to the basic brick-and-mortar model that you see here. Breaking it down further, we now show where the demand is located relative to the site and a relative distance from the demand to the location. The model measures the amount of demand that can be effectively drawn to the prospective location. And this is where the effects of competition based on a type of competitor and their location relative to the site and demand plays an important role in the final sales estimate. This could be primary, secondary, as well as tertiary competitors that are included in the model. Now, the attractiveness of a prospective site relative to other options is also taken into account in measuring how much demand can be expected to be drawn to a site. And this is based on a combination of site-specific and trade area characteristics, as you see in the site detail report. Finally, affinity relates back to our knowledge of the customer, including their propensity to frequent this location relative to other options. It must be noted that the science behind the development of a spatial interaction model rests with our ability as analysts to measure these impacts and contribution to total sales interactively. One of the main advantages of this approach is that the decision maker can now utilize what-if scenarios when evaluating a site placement decision interactively. The size of the unit, measuring the impacts of a new store or competitor, changing the size of the location, etc., all fall within the reach of the development and application of this tool to support the decision-making process. I'll turn it over to Gary to recap the webinar.
Thanks, Joe. So at a really high level, to kind of just recap what we've gone through, we have identified that there's an abundance of data out there in the marketplace. This is no surprise if you're in the retail space. We talked about how critical it is for key decision makers to have the right data in front of them when they're making their decisions about stores and assortments. We talked about the art and science of model development and how important it is to have this information, to have your multidimensional look at what are the right marketplace drivers and what is the right data that you're considering when you're estimating store performance. And then finally, site potential modeling is a scalable solution. So everything from depending on the complexity and the accuracy, every retailer needs to be involved in this process, but to go from basic descriptive models all the way through very complex spatial interactive models with the payback of more accuracy and a better outcome. So with that, I want to go for obviously an expert in the space, so a lot of really great information. Both Joe and I are available. You'll have our contact information here. You'll be able to, we can help if you're, depending on no matter where you are in your journey to kind of develop a modeling process within your organizations. We have the data and the expertise to help you get started. So with that, I will turn it back over to Debbie.
All right, yeah, thanks to both Gary and Joe for a great presentation and sharing some terrific graphics that can just give us a visual guide to what to expect here. So we do have some questions, and I think we're going to jump right into them. Our first question is about the mobility data. And I know that Gary had talked about the value of mobile data. This attendee wants to know a little bit more about, what are we talking about when we're talking about the mobile data? Where does it come from? And also, does it violate rules regarding PII laws?
Oh, it's a good question. So mobile data, there's a lot of various mobile data sources that we have within our platform that are available for our clients, our customers, and most of it is coming from the movement of customers' devices in and around a specific area. So where do they spend the evening? Where do they spend most of the day? And as those things are tracked and moved, we're able to aggregate that information. From a privacy data, all of that is anonymized. So there is no way for us to specifically say whose cell phone or that we've seen this cell phone in the same spot. What we're doing here is aggregating. We're more interested in the aggregation to look for patterns within how those devices are moving in and out of a geography. Where it changes a little bit is like with some of the loyalty programs. If customers opt in, we can get a little more precise about who they are. But by the same token, all of that data is really stringently managed by privacy laws. I don't know, Joe. Do you have any other input on that?
Yeah, I think the only other thing I want to add, Gary, and everything that you said obviously is correct. But you know, and one of the ways that you know, the companies collect this information is through mobile phone apps. You know, there's hundreds of thousands of mobile phone apps that can be tapped into. And what these apps do is they send periodic location updates to a dedicated advertising server. So that's the only thing I want to add, but everything else what you mentioned is correct.
All right, terrific, thanks. And so as a follow-up to that, one of the attendees wants to know, so what data do you normally request from a client as input for building a site model?
Yeah, for a site model, it's really a combination of what information they have on their customer, on their locations. We look at sales information, historical sales information, when locations actually open, when they closed, the concept type, etc. We also look at customer information, whatever they have available through loyalty database or CRM. We utilize those data points as well. In addition to that, we always like to have site characteristic data. And what I mean by that is information on accessibility, on signage, visibility, as well as management rating, consumer experience information, whatever they can provide that helps us to better understand what some of the key drivers are of a successful location. Now, that being said, we also provide externally available data on consumer preferences, on demand, retail patronage, and things of that nature. So there's a lot of information that's available externally that we then want to bring into the actual model development process. And where there are holes, where there are limitations in the data, then we always look at ways to bridge those gaps through maybe a combination of other data we collected as well as some of the externally available information. Gary, is there anything you want to add to that?
No, I think you covered it. I think you know, it's my only experience is that it also it's very dependent on what it can be by the location, by the category. There's a lot of you can get pretty specific, but I think you pretty much covered it for us. Thanks, Joe.
Okay.
So yeah, so Joe, I think that you addressed the next question, which was a little bit of a surprise to me because this attendee asked, what if I don't have customer data? I pretty much expect most retailers to have customer data at this point, but this attendee wanted to know, what if I don't have it? And I think you addressed that pretty much, talking about the externally available data.
Yeah, that would be to the mobility data. That's what I was referring to earlier, and where we have used mobility data and the linkages to mobility data to fill that void when customer data is not available. And, for example, in defining a trade area.
I would add, though, that even if you don't, even without that, there's still also, there's still a ton of data available that can help you get more precise about, if I know where the trade area is and I can do data enrichment and, ArcGIS, our tool at Esri, customers are able, even without having a customer address, but just by building some of these trade areas, even the simple ones, can really get a ton of different kinds of data about that area, from demographics, from behavioral data, segmentation data. There is a lot of stuff that can come into play. As you get more sophisticated, we can, you can help you get, the model becomes more accurate. But there's really to say that, if I don't have that, I can't play in this space. I don't think that's true at all. I think there still is a ton of anonymous data out there that can help you understand your stores to a much greater degree than you do today if you're not doing this.
That's a good point. Mm-hmm.
All right, good to know. Good to know. All right, so just a couple more questions, and I think we'll wrap up. One of our attendees wants to know a little bit more about the specific tools that you're using to create these analyses.
So let me start with that one because it's we started with the maps. So the first tool is ArcGIS, which is Esri's Esri software, and this is where I'm pulling in any kind of spatially enabled data, which I would argue is literally every piece of data in retail has a geospatial component, be it an address or a location or a route or something. All of that comes into ArcGIS. Our users are able to do the data enrichment that I kind of spoke about in the last question to append data to it, and then create and export that information, and that's where I think Joe in the modeling process can also pick that up, and we are also doing all of the visualizations to share to create those intuitive maps that help people understand what those are. So that's the mapping and the geospatial side. Joe, if you want to talk a little bit about the modeling process.
Yeah, just from a very top level process. Our analysts have access to a series of data management tools that are really designed, and our own processes that are designed to increase the efficiency of getting access to these data, pulling these data points together as part of the feeds that are required for developing the model and the application of the model. And then the resultant tools will then feed into the various platforms depending on the client needs and user requirements.
All right, terrific. Thank you. All right, just two more quick questions I think we have time for. One attendee wants to know, how do I know that my trade areas are correct?
So that, it depends on, I went through the various, I sort of talked through how trade areas have developed in sophistication. And today, I think as you get more, as you use the tools to become more precise, and you can start to leverage more of the kind of that location centric, and I'm thinking about building trade areas at lower levels of granularity, and the tools at my disposal to build those trade areas become more specific. When I am, it's a little bit of I want to be able to react. So as I'm looking at results, and I'm sort of talking around, but I'm thinking about if I'm a sporting goods department and I want to be able to find where customers are who are, how do I know these are people who are doing who are buying sporting goods in my store? I have to have the right data sources available, and I have to validate those data sources against the trade areas that I'm developing. And as I start to build that, I can start to make my trade areas more accurate.
Yep.
Okay, fantastic. And finally, and I just want to remind the audience, if you have any other questions, please feel free to send them through, because Gary and Joe can reach out to you afterwards. I'm sure you still have some questions. So last one. Can I track online activity in my modeling and trade area development?
You can. All of our customers are very interested in connecting online and mobile activity with their trade areas. And I know, Joe, we haven't talked about this, but I know there's a lot of interest in, when you build a store in a specific area, what happens to the mobile-only customers? Just because I have that exposure, our customers will see a lift in overall activity around their given brand just because I've got a store, whether or not the customer's after shopping in their store. But if you have a robust CRM, and if people are buying anything from you on a mobile device or online, then you have that information, you have their location. You can start to connect them either to their closest store, or if you have a loyalty program, you can connect them to the store where they shop most often, and you can start to sort of build that web of how they behave with your particular brand in a given marketplace.
Yeah, that's correct. Yeah, the only thing I would add to that, Gary, is that you're right. I mean, we can leverage the trade area that's defined by the usage behavior of that customer, and use that as another overlay, and then use other data sources to understand what that potential is for other channels above and beyond brick and mortar. And that's when you get into that construct of looking at the relationship between brick and mortar and e-commerce, for example, purchase behavior, and as part of a separate feed for model development.
All right, terrific. Go ahead, Gary.
No, I was just going to tell you that's exactly how I think about it.
All right, excellent.
Good.
All right, well, I think we're going to get ready to wrap up. So I just want to remind the audience that you can still register for more sessions in the series, and our next session is coming up on September 18th at 2 p.m. titled The Payoff of Post-Purchase Engagement, Benchmarks and Best Practices for Driving Repeat Purchases. So we look forward to seeing you then. Once again, I want to thank both Joe and Gary for the great presentation and discussion, and thank our attendees for sending in some terrific questions. Until next time, enjoy the rest of your day.